Howdy folks, John here. Whenever you get a box in the mail from Buddy RC, you know it's going to be a fun day, especially knowing that there's charging equipment inside. Better still that it's an iCharger. For those of you who follow my website and my YouTube channel, you know I'm somewhat of an iCharger fanboy. I've been using their chargers now for over a decade and just cannot say enough good about them. Just amazing chargers. When it comes to value, performance, and certainly quality, they are tops. I want to thank TJ at Buddy RC for sending me these goodies so we can all have a look at them together. As usual, I will have product links down in the description so you can check one of these things out yourself. So, what did TJ send here? Looks like we got some XT90 plugs. Got one of their paraboards, XT60s. Sent me a power cable. And the unit itself, this is the iCharger S6. Pretty much their smallest and most powerful charger at 1100 watts and up to 40 amp charge rate. Quickly looking at the unit itself, as you can see, it's very small. The dimensions are 83 in length, 65 in width here, and roughly 37 millimeters high. And it weighs around 170 grams. We've got XT90 outputs and inputs. There's a little multi-function plug for temperature probe. You can also use it as a servo driver. Your balance port, of course. Air intake or exhaust, cooling fans on the other side. You can see a big heat sink inside. On the bottom we've got a little flip up so it will sit at an angle on your bench. That's nice, and two little rubberized feet. The main specs that most people would be wondering about: input voltage is 7 to 32 volts, again through the XT90. Maximum charge current up to 40 amps. Like I said, 1100 watts. And the maximum current drain for balancing is 2 amps. What else did we get in here? Two of them to make your own harnesses up. And they're the anti-spark XT90 plugs, which is nice, so you won't get that spark when you plug your battery or your power supply in. So I'm going to have to make up a power harness for this thing. He did send me a power harness, but it's got the it's got the male XT90 on here. So I'm going to have to chop that off. I'll solder this up so we've got a dedicated power plug. And I'm going to get the paraboard that he sent. These things are just awesome. What I like about the V3 paraboard, one, it's fuse protected, but it's also, you can daisy chain it. It's got 4mm bananas inputs as well as a balance port, so you can daisy chain another standard paraboard up to it, because now I'm going to have this paraboard dedicated basically for this charger, because it will have the XT90 plug soldered on. So I'm going to do that up real quick so we can power it up. That was quite easy, as you saw, soldering the XT90 plugs onto the power cord and the V3 paraboard. I'll have links to both of these below in the description if you wanted to take a peek at them. As I said, one thing nice about the V3 paraboard is you do have the 4mm inputs at the back, So not only can you daisy chain, you know, another paraboard up to it if you found that your 4 inputs were not enough, if you wanted to charge more than 4 packs. But what I really like about this is I can use it with all my existing, you know, charge harnesses that have got 4mm plugs on them. You know, for example, here's a little 2S micro pack board, and basically I would just be using this V3 paraboard. Now that it's specifically dedicated for the S6, I can use it as an adapter for every other little charging harness and board I've got. Lots of connectivity options, in other words. Anyway, let's get this thing powered up. I was wondering why they used XT90 inputs instead of XT60. You know, 40 amp output, you certainly don't need a 90 amp rated plug. But I do appreciate that with the XT90, you can use their anti-spark plug. And for anyone who's been hooking these things up for a while, I don't know about you, but I sometimes question if I've got the polarity right when I get that spark, even though I'm expecting it. I'm just powering this through a 15 volt, 350 watt power supply. At the end of the video though, I'll hook it up to my 24 volt, 1200 watt supply, see how much power we can output in this thing. And where's our paraboard? Plug him in. Oh, need the balance harness. There. Easy breezy. I should mention on this thing you've got a micro SD card slot. That's to update firmware or to use to log files. You've also got a micro USB port, and you can hook this thing up to your PC using Junsi's charger console. Comes with this disc, and the software for that interface is on here, as well as the manual. It's a pretty big manual. iChargers do so much. I only use a fraction of what they're capable of doing. But if you really want to nerd out, you can, you know, check that manual out. I'll have a link to it below in the description as well. Again, the value is outstanding. Anyone who's seen my RC battery charger page on my website, I'll fire a link to it below too, and a little card doodad as well. One of the criteria I go by in choosing one charger over another is the price per watt. And at around 130 bucks and 1100 watts, you know, this thing comes out to around 12 cents a watt. Pretty amazing value. Your selection is done with this sprung-loaded up-down or sideways scroll wheel. And if you hold it, you can access different menus. And as you can see, you can go up or down to make your choice, and then enter to select it. Just going to quickly navigate through the menus so you get a better idea of what all you can do. So under the charger setup, you can modify the temperature and fan settings. You can change your beep tones, LCD display, that's what we were in. Set your brightness and your contrast. Input and power setting limits. Save and load your configurations. Language, we've got English and German. Can calibrate, can log your files. Servo test, as I said, you can use this as a servo tester. You can select the type of servo, centering point, pulse rate, and you've got 3 different tests: linear test where you move it yourself, fixed endpoint tests, and then a sweeping test. I should mention that the servo plug here does not output power to the servo, it just outputs the PWM signal, so you do have to hook your servo up to a separate power source, either a battery or whatever, through a Y splitter. And you've also got a pulse test. Here you could hook receiver channels up to it and see what the receiver is outputting as far as frequency and pulse rate, or even a flybarless unit or a flight controller, I suppose. And you can also monitor. on the charge menu. If you just push it, this is where we can select our different battery chemistries. You can see there's quite a few: LiPo, lithium ion, Li-Fi, lithium high voltage, LTO. It's an odd one, but it supports it. Nickel metal hydride, of course, NiCad, nickel zinc, lead acid, and you can also use your S6 charger as a power supply. We just select that. So you can select the voltage output as low as, so it'll only go as low as 2 volts all the way up to 26.5. And as far as current, it will go all the way up to 40 amps. Let's see what the lowest current output is. 1 amp. So kind of cool to have a little power supply. Okay, we'll just plug a battery into this thing so you can see the wealth of information on the display. This is just a 3S 2200 milliamp hour pack. And we'll zoom back in. So first thing we can see here is the voltage of the pack at the top. We can see each of the 3 cells' voltages, the sum of the voltages. We can see the delta V imbalance sitting around 4 millivolts. Down at the bottom here, we've got our input voltage from our power supply, the current it's using, the amp hours, because we're not charging it, and the internal temperature of the S6 charger itself. So one of the most useful features that I like in a computerized charger is measuring internal resistance. And to do that, we just hold the little dial in the up position for a few seconds. And there we can see the IR of the cells, the total IR. It also gives you the line resistance. And to start a charge cycle, you just hold the button in. It will bring up the memory selection screen. So if you've got different memories programmed in here, you could select one. I just use the default LiPo setting. We can charge it, we can charge it, we can discharge it, we can cycle it, or we can balance it only. Let's do a charge cycle. Hit enter again. So here it's charging up. Little red light is blinking. Says what the charge current is, showing the pack voltage, showing the current going into the pack, showing how many watts are being delivered. And we can see the cells coming up as well, still showing us our delta voltage imbalance. And if you wanted to increase the charge rate, this is why I never bother with actually creating memories, because I never consistently have the same packs charging. I may be para-charging a few, I may be just charging 1 pack, and then if I want to change the current, I just hold this up. And this is where you can modify the current. So if we wanted to go to a higher current, don't want to go too high here, I've just got this 1 pack. Hit modify, and there you can see the current is coming up. And that's all I do. Whenever I start a charge cycle, I always just start it with that default program at 2 amps, and then I will go in and adjust my current rating for the pack or packs I'm charging. And if you scroll down, you can scroll through the 3 different fields here. Right now we're at cells. We can go to IR info. We can look at the information. And then the amp hours that are going into each cell so far. So lots of information given on the iCharger X6 display, and that's one reason why I do like these new iChargers. Ever since I got the 410 Duo, just love how feature rich this is. Here, let me just stop this, and we'll go back. We'll go to balance only. So this little bar graph beside each cell is showing the amount of load being placed on the cell to bring it back into balance proximity with the others. So we'll see number 1 here, it's got a larger load than cell number 2, just got a little bit of load, and both of those are have got the load to try to bring them down to the same voltage as cell number 3. The balancing capability on these iChargers is very good. You know, we're at a 1 millivolt balance difference between all the cells. There, it says it's done. So that's just the basic operation. Again, the manual goes into a lot more detail. You can modify each of these. LiPo capacity, you can have cells at auto, you can change, this is where you could change the current if you didn't want it to default to 2 amps. There's normal balance, fast balance, user balance, no balance, and slow balance. I just picked normal. That just dictates the amount of delta V difference between the cells. Fast would have a higher delta V, slow would have the smallest delta V imbalance difference. But normal is, I find normal fine. So let's get this thing hooked up to a bigger power supply, and we'll hook up a bunch of 6S packs and see just how much power it can output. Okay, so here's our setup. Just got 4 6S packs all hooked into our paraboard here. They range from 5,000 milliamp hours up to 5,300. Got a couple of 51s there. So a 1C charge rate would be 20.5 amps, but we're going to go all the way up to 40 amps and see if it will work with the little iCharger S6 here. We will zoom into the display and we will start a charge cycle. So again, my method, I just start the normal LiPo charge. But I will dial the current up because this just defaults to 2 amps. And we will go up to 40 amps here. Enter and modify. So there we've climbed all the way up to roughly 40 amps, 39.99, delivering 944 watts roughly. We can see our chargers, we can see our power supply's input voltage down here, 27.89 roughly. Chargers outputting 35.56 amps, showing the amp hours. And there's all our cells coming up. Got a 5 or 6 millivolt balance difference between all the cells, so that's looking really healthy. And we can look at the IR of each cell. Info and capacity. We can see the amp hours that have gone into each cell. And the little fan is on. It's ramping up. So it is a variable speed fan based on how hot the internal temperature is. You can see the internal temp's up to 45.9 Celsius now. That's the little fan indicator, that little green squiggle there. Fan's quite quiet. The main fan noise is coming from my power supply. Unit itself is getting a little bit warm. To have that much power in a palm-size unit, just incredible. So happy with it. We'll just finish off here with a few final thoughts on the iCharger S6. So if you're in the market for a palm-sized yet incredibly powerful little charger that boasts iCharger's legendary quality and features at around $130, 12 cents per watt, this thing is hard to beat, in my opinion. It's certainly got all the tricks and bells and whistles that I would ever need, and then a lot more. Pros, of course, are the size. I love the intuitive menu layout. It is, however, going to take a little getting used to over my 410 Duo. Even though the menu layout is similar, this has a completely different menu access system. And it is a little bit interesting figuring everything out with just essentially an up and a down and a push. But it comes to you pretty quick. the main things are quite easy to access. Getting into some of the deeper programming and changes, though, takes a little bit of figuring out and playing around. Again, the manual goes through all that, though. So hopefully it will give me many years of service like all my other iChargers have. So hopefully that covered the main features of the iCharger S6 if you're considering picking one up, and gave you a little more information on it. Thanks for watching, folks. Happy charging. We'll see you next time.